This is All Things Cancer, the podcast of the National Foundation for Cancer Research, hosted by NFCR President and CEO, Dr. Sujuan Ba. Each episode explores the hindsight, insights, and foresight of cancer research and care, and how NFCR and its partners are accelerating the path to cures.
Welcome to All Things Cancer. I am Dr. Sujuan Ba. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Anna Barker, one of the most influential architects of cancer research. Over her long and distinguished career, Dr. Barker has worked across academia, nonprofit research, biotech, and federal government agency, including serving as a principal deputy director at the National Cancer Institute. Dr. Barker has been a close collaborator and trusted advisor to me and NFCR for more than 2 decades. She has helped shape some of the most transformative platforms in oncology, such as the Cancer Genome Atlas and GBM AGILE. In this episode, we focus on how cancer research has evolved, why convergence science and high-quality data matter, and how artificial intelligence is beginning to reshape discovery, development, and cancer care in cancer research. Dr. Barker also shares a personal reflection on what drew her into cancer research and why she believes we are at the most exciting and a critical inflection point for the future of cancer research. I hope you enjoy this conversation. Let's jump in. Hello, Anne. So good to have you back at this year's NFCR Global Summit and award ceremony. Thank you for your insightful and provocative comments on the panel discussion. I'm very pleased with the dynamic and stimulating panel discussions this morning, starting with Monica Bertagnoli's keynote address. Tell me what you think about the wide range of discussion and debate you heard this morning.
Well, I thought it was really one of the best explorations that I've heard of artificial intelligence in cancer, and I'm in the middle of this space. So I thought it really covered, all the way from basic science through, how we're using foundation models to sort of begin this conversation around AI. It's very early, Sujan. I mean,
Yes.
It really is still very early. I thought, there was several references today to the overhype. I don't think you can overhype this. It's too important. And, I think the more conversation, the better, honestly. There's some claims probably that are, a little overblown in terms of the power of this, but it's going to be transformational.
Yeah.
So.
And I think that's why it's very important to have a very focused day talking about all aspects of AI, the hope of the AI and the challenges and then the opportunities. So I thought the conversation were fantastic. Everybody has so much to offer. I have to really shut down the panels. Too many questions. We will have questions all day long today if we don't shut down.
That is one thing that I thought was interesting. We could have had, half the time go to questions, and but I thought it was well balanced. I thought today.
And and I have to say, I learned from you doing these kind of meetings. I remember when we first started working together back in 2003, and you were doing those think tank forums and workshops, and you always have all types of people there from multiple disciplinary fields and in a very invigorating environment, 50, 60 people each time. We have energy in the room and really tackle the problems. I learned from you.
Well, the more ideas you can get from the most people who sit in different regions and areas and spaces, as we call science now, the better off you are, because you can get in a bubble, you can be in a silo, and that era is over. And so science overall is moving toward real convergence. And in oncology, it's here. I mean, it has to go in this direction. So, you know, it's not going to be easy, Sujuan. I mean, you know,
exactly.
we've actually structured a research enterprise that is siloed, and that is the antithesis of how you can do artificial intelligence. You want more integration, more convergence, and ultimately, you know, a lot of people are going to be left behind because, unfortunately, a lot of our folks are not trained well enough to actually know how to develop an algorithm, let's say, or to even use their own talents to reach out to others who can help them with this. So, you know, I think it's the best of times and the worst of times, because it's the best of times because we've never had an opportunity like this in our history, and a little bit the worst of times because one thing, you know, I care about is thinking about science holistically, and we should have started talking more directly with mathematicians, physicists, chemists, you know, decades ago. And now we find out ourselves a place that, you know, something I really believe in is this convergence is going to change everything. But a lot of people are not prepared for it. So
and
it's very
today
hard.
we have everybody in the room. You know, and I remember the advice you gave to me when we were building up the GBM Agile is think about big science and think about right size of the meeting, not just a gigantic meeting, and get the right people in the room and you get things done. So I've been following your advice for the last 20 years now.
Well, but you enabled GBM Agile. First of all, that was an extraordinary project. I've done a lot of extraordinary projects, but that was a truly extraordinary project. I don't know of any time in science where we were able to pull together an entire community, and this was, you know, this is the brain tumor community that didn't classically work together.
Correct.
And
yes.
And what we effectively did was to have a couple of think tanks to say, you know, how do we rethink this disease? And we did that with a lot of colleagues. So we organized GBM Agile. So see if I can remember GBM Agile, what this Agile means. But it's adaptive, global, innovative learning environment, Agile. And that's exactly what it is. It's over those meetings, we set up a system to actually design that trial. And then, so this was one of the boldest moves I've ever made. We brought together about 135 people to work on the trial. We set up a series of committees to work on every aspect of designing the trial. The design phase lasted about 18 months. But we had those 130 people working in those committees virtually every week. And they all came. They all paid their own ways to come to the meetings. They supported the trial in so many ways. So it was an example of what I call a knowledge network. I believe in knowledge networks. And so the trial is ongoing now. It's enrolling patients. And
it's very gratifying. We are part of that.
Now it's successful. I mean,
it's so successful.
It's enrolling
right
patients.
Yeah.
Patients are benefiting from all that work, and so. But you know, it couldn't have happened had we not brought that entire group together.
Yeah,
So.
and I always tell people that that is one of the most gratifying, rewarding projects that I have done together with you and others. Yeah. And
it was really a team effort. I mean, it was an amazing project, and you know, and I've done some amazing projects, but that one, in terms of people being that dedicated, and I mean, you know, was international. We had
international.
And everybody showed up. I mean, all the time. So it was amazing.
So that is actually your signature, and that's your legacy. And you are so good at organizing big science. Besides about the genomics project and then GBM Agile, and you are always thinking, doing things unique and from multiple angles. That has a lot to do, I think, with your background. You have a very unique career background. So tell me about what makes you transform all the times. And so you are almost like a reservoir of the knowledge from all aspects of the oncology world.
Well, I'm very curious, and I have a lot of ideas, and so I loved the laboratory when I was doing my work for my PhD, and I could have stayed in the laboratory, and I could have stayed in academia. But it was so obvious to me because I had trained before I went into cancer research. I trained in chemistry, physical chemistry, and organic chemistry.
Oh wow, we were
the same,
trained
yeah.
similarly.
But I actually took that a bit further because I took up really understanding quantum theory and quantum mechanics. And so I became, by force, I had to get enough mathematical knowledge under my belt to be able to think through those kinds of projects. And so I came, I looked at laboratory science, and, honestly, I worked in immunology, immunotherapy very early on. And so I had an opportunity to go and oversee, as a postdoc, to go and oversee some of NCI's work. And like most people in oncology, I really got into cancer research because I've lost my whole family to cancer.
But, I did not know that.
Yes, so my grandmother is the person who was closest to me, and she was very smart, very wonderful person. And but she died when I was 12 years old from pancreas cancer.
Oh.
And then, of course, the rest of my life was losing the rest of my family. But it inspired me, even at 12 years old, that I wanted to be a scientist. And so when I finished my degree in chemistry, the choice was I was going to get an MD as well, but I decided I didn't really want to practice medicine. So I stayed in research and actually moved from chemistry into immunology and microbiology at Ohio State University. And it was an amazing experience. I got to do so many wonderful things. But, that experience taught me that you need small science because that's where ideas flourish. But we reached a point, almost 40 years ago now, where you've got to know something, for example, about the genome. You've got to know a lot about the way that sort of what I like to call the digitization of biology. So we're digitizing ourselves now.
Yeah.
So what does that mean? It means that we're functionally operating like a computer.
And
so
we're understanding our whole body system better and better.
And when you think about it, all the way back in the early discovery of some of the cancer genes, especially the oncogenes, oncology always had a leg up in terms of, is this going to be really important? Is knowing the information that's going to drive what becomes cancer, do we have to know that? Is that basic science, that fundamental understanding of cancer going to be necessary? I think that's still an open question. How much we know and we don't know. I thought one of the projects, that GBM module project, you'll recall that Web Cavity gave this great talk. The first think tank we had, the known knowns, the known unknowns, and the unknown unknowns. Remember that?
I know, that is a famous one.
That is a famous talk. But I talked them into giving that talk because I wanted to make it obvious that for this particular disease, GBM, we don't know very much. Right.
We did a knowledge inventory and clinical aspect inventory to see what's missing.
Yeah.
Why none of those were make any difference for a patient. And that was quite interesting, from my perspective.
Getting back to your question, I think what really propelled me into this idea that I love bringing groups together and getting convergence of knowledge. I think it was
I have to comment, you are one of a few people who can do that.
People ask me, how do you do these big things like this? It's really simple. It really is very simple. If you have a great idea you have to start, right? So many people have a great idea and they never, ever start. How many people have you said, I wish you heard say, I wish I had done this, or I wish I had done that? Yeah, you have to start. And then you have to do the work. You can always fail. Failure's fine, because you're testing an idea. Quitting is not a good idea. That's a very bad idea. So I never support quitting, but so that's the way I've done everything I've ever done. And I learned that years ago because I'm a polymath. I mean, essentially, I trained in chemistry and physics and then came into biology. But it made me understand all the power of all of these disciplines in terms of understanding a disease and then ultimately controlling it or treating it and ultimately preventing it, hopefully.
And I emulate
Yes.
that aspect in my works. And
Yeah, so I tell people when they're very discipline oriented, if you only focus on those areas that are the known knowns, and maybe you know some of the known unknowns in your own field, you're only going to be as smart as the people in the field. And whereas if you bring people in, they're going to make you better. They're going to help you ask better questions. You're going to do better experiments, and you're going to have better outcomes. And so, but we've developed a different system. And coming back to this idea, though, big science is really convergent science.
Yes.
And we probably make a mistake calling it big science. I mean, it's just really convergent science. And so I had the opportunity to do that very early on in my career at Battelle Memorial Institute, big research foundation. And but I got to do something, I was 30 years old, and I went from a postdoc into there and started my research career there. But what the place actually taught me is the power of bringing people together, because it's a multidisciplinary, a lot of engineering, a lot of AI, even then. And so I learned the power of what it could happen when you bring these people together.
so very early on in your career.
Very. And I got to...
that's unique. A lot of people who got their PhD, they just wanted to focus on their own research area and work in their own lab. Much as,
I never cared about that. I never cared about that. I published a lot of papers, but I knew that, one paper doesn't change the world. I mean, there have been a couple of papers that changed the world, but you do that because that's what you're rewarded for. I mean, and so now that's totally out of hand. 80% of our literature in oncology is not reproducible. And so we forced people to publish, to just get promoted.
It's a global phenomenon.
It is, and it's unfortunate because I have a colleague with the Nobel Prize, and once I was introducing him, and he's a good friend, but I had never looked at his CV very closely. He had 35 publications, and he got a Nobel Prize.
That's a rarity.
I know people who have 600 publications, and they'll never get a Nobel Prize. But I also had the opportunity very early in my career to take on a leadership position as an executive. And so in this particular institute, there's 7,000 people. I was the only female executive there for 15, 16 years.
You are ahead of the curve.
So it allowed me to do things that probably I would never have gotten to do that young. So one of the things that I did is we had a huge grant from the National Cancer Institute. So I oversaw pretty much all the drug development at the NCI in really the foundational period of when we were building our ability to develop drugs at NCI. You got to remember, there were no cancer drugs developed by the industry before NCI actually started developing cancer drugs. So, we developed the first cancer drug. Taxol came out of NCI. Almost all of the chemotherapeutics came out of NCI as well, the toxicity, the very toxic agents. And, there was a group of people that oversaw that. Mintz DeVita was the NCI director then. And so they had this big decision network where they made decisions about what was going to be developed and what wasn't. So I had a group of 60-some people out here in Washington who really staffed that and saw that whole thing move forward. So I got to do things that nobody else could have possibly thought about doing in their career. And
that's the flexibility you had.
Yes, I did. And then But then it allowed me to, I always tell people who are afraid to change jobs or don't have the confidence, have the confidence to, if you know that you can do something better somewhere else, then you should move. You should do something different. And so that's how I got to start a biotech company. You know, I saw technology spinning out of my own divisions, and then, you know, other technologies were coming along. So I thought, oh, this looks pretty easy.
So you just made the jump when you see a promising technology asset. You just decided to go about it.
I decided I could try this because I thought.
And you were very successful. You took it
I
to
was.
IPO.
Yes, I was, and I took it public in 1994, and unfortunately,
Early. That's very early.
very early.
Yeah.
I helped a lot of my colleagues in academia to develop their own companies. But then I had the opportunity to go to the NCI, where I'd been an advisor forever. And I went, and I said, I'll go for 3 years. And I ended up staying 10. So,
Yeah.
So that just showed. But it was just an exciting.
It was a good 10 years.
It was a good, exciting time, So, and I got to, so fundamentally, the way we developed it was pretty simple. It sounds simple now, but so we wanted to develop a foundation, biospecimens, right? So we tried to get uniformity of biospecimens, high quality. Same thing with data. So those are the first 2 projects that I did. And then I did something that surprised everybody, because I had a lot of other projects to do, but I did a project in nanotechnology and developed these centers around the country. So, but the National Nanotechnology Alliance, which was a big alliance, the reason I put it very high on the list was I thought, we can do all these things, but we can't deliver them. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to put the delivery systems in place, and whether it was therapeutics or diagnostics or what have you, those are all now in the pharma industries, now. So we did set the stage for that, and it solved one of the problems that I saw coming at the end.
But when I was at the National Cancer Institute, I did a couple of things that I think really help us to prepare for precision oncology. One of those was the Cancer Genome Atlas. And essentially, TCGA allowed us to sequence the cancer genes. It's a lot of work, and we could talk about that for a long time. But the way it was organized essentially was to have the best samples for everything that we did, to have the highest quality data, to have the best people in the world. It was a very big project, several hundred people working on it, probably nearly 100 institutions working on it. And it went on, it started in 2004 and was completed in 2018. But the interesting thing about that trial is we started as a pilot. And so I chose GBM as the first tumor that we had sequenced, we were going to sequence in that trial, and or in that project. And so we did that, right? So GBM is the most fatal of all the adult brain tumors. We had done hundreds of trials. We've never had a successful drug for GBM. So the idea was to make data available so that we could bring people to work on GBM. Scientists want data. That's what makes them run. That's what gets them up in the morning. So we did that. And it really did make a difference. I mean, then we had a few grants in GBM. We had a few people working on it. There's literally tens of thousands of scientists working on GBM today because we have the data, just because we have the data.
It wasn't easy.
Profound impact.
Yeah. It was not easy, Sujuan, I should tell you. It was not an easy project. Well, I mean, you got to remember, this is an era in the early, let's see, it was around 2003 when we started. And the human genome had just been finished. So it made all the sense in the world to say that we knew what the oncogenes are by and large, and so it made sense to start sequencing, but we got a lot of pushback on the project because it was going to be a big project, and individual investigators didn't see why we needed it.
And they didn't want to give up their tissue samples.
Exactly. They didn't want the tissue samples, but more than that, they had not yet appreciated that even though we knew a few things about the oncogenes, we knew very little about the cancer genome. And so, especially on a per cancer basis. So it turned out to be, we got a lot of pushback. So we started that project as a pilot to demonstrate the value. I have to say, if I look back on that, if we had depended on individual investigators to sequence all the cancer genomes, it probably would have taken 75 years, 100 years. So, and
we wouldn't be where we are.
And the data would not have been reproducible probably. So,
Yeah.
But then the project that's still ongoing at NCI is the one that came after that, in that we set up a national proteomics initiative.
Yeah.
Because you have to now, you have to understand that the genome is getting expressed. And so and this was after, I started that just after we had a big issue in the country with proteomics, because we had some people that misrepresented some data. And so most of the scientific community...
I still remember that scandal.
Yeah. No one wanted to pursue proteins then, and or proteomics. And so it took a while, but we started out with just technology, but we actually, they grew that into a huge project, and it's really set the stage now for a whole generation of new therapies. So, but my last project was the most interesting, and because I got to do what I wanted to do all along, and that is, really work on convergence and of the different specialties, the different areas.
Yeah, I remember your award presentation title is about convergence of science when you got the inaugural award for the Beacon Award from IMHI Accelerator Fund.
So that was a dream of mine, and I had great support at NCI to do it, but we set up something called the Physical Sciences Oncology Centers, where we did this. We brought, physicists, mathematicians, cancer biologists, and engineers together. And it really did set the stage for AI in terms of beginning.
So that's the beginning of the AI.
Yes.
People didn't even realize what it is yet.
And Sandy Anderson, who talked today, on your panel,
Yes.
he was part of that. I mean, so we have now all of these from that particular initiative. There were 14 of those centers. So we have these pockets of people who worked on cancer evolution. They worked on mathematical models. They worked on the physics of cancer. So, those were things that started people thinking about AI. And so I think it was one of the best projects, because it's only now that we're seeing, biology is Bayesian. Everything is occurring all the time, in real time, in space and time. So we don't think like that. A couple of things came up today, and people asked questions about, how do you measure the dynamics of these things? How do we know that, we do everything assuming, everything's in 2 dimensions, and we're freezing something in time.
And we're trying to do it in 3 dimensions now.
Yes, and none of that's real, you see, because, so now we have, with AI, when you start collecting enough data from enough places and building your algorithms accordingly, you'll be able to, this will become very predictive technology, so.
With today's environment, do you think that momentum you created is continuing the acceleration, or it's getting setback from the current environment, funding environment, political priorities different from back then?
Well, science always finds a way. I mean, it will find a way, but it's not, I think the reduction in government funding right now is a problem.
So now, you'll get your genome sequenced in the next 4 to 5 years for under $100. Now, it won't be the depth of coverage, but you don't need it. I mean, you do know, the genes you inherit and the genes that are actually, you need to know something about the germline, the genes you inherit, and the somatic genes that change after you're born. And everybody will get that. I mean, there are whole countries sequencing their populations now. And that has a certain amount of value. It doesn't answer all the questions, however. So the one thing you have to consider when I say that cancer is at an inflection point, or I should say cancer research, We're now producing huge amounts of data, big data, it's called. We call it big data. It's just kind of a tsunami, actually. And so we're trying to figure out how to analyze it all. Most of the data has been created in the last 4 or 5 years when you consider the multi-omics data has been there with TCGA, but now you've got all of the, all the imaging data, all the clinical data, everything coming from, people's medical records. So big data has kind of put us in a place where we don't have people to analyze the data. We don't have enough trained professionals to analyze the data. And I'm very worried about, we don't have standards for the algorithms we're building. We don't have standards for declaring something is actually important or not for a patient. So I don't know where this all ends up.
Because of the reduction of the funding, do you think we can actually take advantage of this special critical period and weed out the science that's not so good and only elevate the best science forward? Do you think they have the capability of making that kind of judgment?
I'm hopeful. So I'm very hopeful that's what's going to come out of this. And it could. It could.
So that's the bright
there
spot
is,
of that,
yeah,
right?
there is that possibility because you kept saying today that, this was a focused activity. And you're going to have to focus to move artificial intelligence where it needs to be in an area like oncology. You really do have to change the way we fund science and the way we do it. And because it's counterintuitive, you cannot inform a multi-tiered algorithm with one discipline. You're not going to go very far.
I totally agree.
Yeah, so we don't have good data. Let's just start there. And in oncology, we funded a lot of projects, we collected a lot of data, but getting back to TCGA, they didn't standardize the samples. They aren't extracted the same way. They weren't managed the same way.
And Monica mentioned about that. Monica basically said right now, a lot of the data, the samples we have, they are not really usable.
But it's interesting, we proposed, when I was at NCI, we proposed a national biorepository and a national data bank. It was turned down by our boards. Now this was in around 2004. It was about that same year.
That's the OBBR, right?
Yeah, you remember.
I remember I worked with Caroline Compton.
Yes.
And you introduced me to her.
But that year, the UK came to us and we shared our ideas and plans for the National Biorepository. Well, they went back to UK and did that. They established the UK Biobank, and it's now probably the most important data set in the world. It is.
So you think that their data set is better than ours?
Well, their overall data set is because it's essentially, it's huge, and they're collecting a lot of the data that isn't being collected by other projects.
But they do run into serious issues of longer waiting for the patients because they require every sample to be sent to the central facilities, and they end up having such a big backlog. And patients are waiting for months.
Yeah, it is. But what's really interesting is the scientific establishment in the UK saw the importance all the way back then of actually pooling all of this information and beginning to make it available broadly. I believe in open science. And so we shot ourselves in the foot. So let's just be clear.
The U.S.?
Yes, yes, we did. The U.S. we did because the way we manage our science is it's peer reviewed, and our boards, now I'm talking about government funding now, but we turned down those projects because we felt that it threatened the R01 investigator, the individual investigator. That's why they were turned down.
Yeah, I do notice any proposals about building the platforms, networks, alliances, those projects usually are not funded.
Yeah, it's hard. But then everybody wanted their own samples. They wanted to run their own sequencing, which was very, was very primitive at that point. but they didn't see, so findings in biology is one thing. Truth in biology is something else. So you're going to associate, you know, the fact that Sujuan is 5'6" tall or whatever she is, and so that means that she likes roses. You know, that may be true. But you know, it's not causative because you're 5 foot whatever you are that you love roses. But that's what we do in oncology. Someone will find something, and it might be an interesting gene, but then they'll go looking for where the effect might be, and they'll come up with something. May be wrong, but they don't do that, you know, so very definitive kind of work that says, oh yeah, this is really causative. It's not just an association. So as a consequence, we have very few biomarkers that we can use in the clinic, and we should have many more targeted drugs, and we don't.
Yeah, and another issue I have about the drug development is we are requiring mice data, and that's a tremendous amount of cost. I always have a skeptical view about having mice data, and a lot of
the mice would agree with you. They would agree with you.
So, you know, a lot of data, beautiful mice data, but they didn't work when they get to phase 1, right? Right now, FDA is trying to get people pivot away from doing the mice data. Do you think that's gonna pan out? Many people still don't believe it, afraid of changing the existing protocols and jumping into the new data set, organoids.
So, but let's go back to AI for a second. The answer is it's probably going to happen, because I think if you look at the way we develop things, the way we especially develop drugs now, there is so much data now about certain kinds of molecules and the toxicity, for example, that they have, how it evolves. Less clear on how efficacious these molecules are, and how reproducible that data might be. But I think you're right. I mean, I don't believe a lot of mouse data, and we use it, you know, to take the next step.
Yes,
but
and
then
it's required next
Well,
step.
if you get through, you know, the ADME phase
Yes.
with your mice, and you've shown that it's efficacious and non-toxic, the nude mouse stuff, I think, is still, the xenografts work, and they're beautiful. I think they're probably better, but again, you're going to add a lot of expense to drug discovery and development. So,
and also, you know, the tumor microenvironment, that is now reflected using the mice model.
you're right, and not only that, you know, the heterogeneity of humans is pretty profound, and so when you take a heterogeneous tumor and you put it in a heterogeneous human, it's very unpredictable, you know, how that's going to behave, which really
That's
drives.
why, you know, those drug development is less than 10% success. I think it's starting from the early on.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I don't think that's going to get a lot better soon. So getting back to AI though, so let's just think about this for a second. So to build these algorithms, I could see you can build algorithms to predict toxicity easily. I think that's going to happen. There's enough data probably on enough drugs to do that. The problem will be, you know, every organ site, you know, whether it's kidney or bladder or, you know, GI, whatever it is, they're all going to have their sort of different nuances in terms of efficacy. It's going to be very hard to predict efficacy, I think, and because of the heterogeneity.
It's not going to be cheaper, and that's what I worry about, because even with all the AI algorithms, you know, the modeling and collecting the data to optimize the algorithm, right? And whatever results you are getting coming out of this AI machine or box, right? You have to verify it in the wet lab and to validate with.
That won't always be true, though. Eventually, you're going to see this. The large, the large language models are going to change dramatically. I mean, they already are. This is not controlled by the academic sector. This is totally controlled by the private sector. AI has the large language models like OpenAI and all the other ones that's come after it. Those are all developed in the private sector.
I have not heard any progress out of the private sector regarding medical AI, medical driven.
There's a lot. Most of it is under the radar screen, and most of it is confidential, lots of it.
Right now.
Yeah, because it's extraordinarily difficult, very complex. But I know OpenAI is very interested in cancer. Google's been doing this for a long time.
And they have not made much splash yet.
I think they will.
So you believe in power of Google?
I do. I do believe in the power of data, and when you bring the kind of data we need together with the intelligence that a group like that has. I mean, so one recent development out of there, that AlphaFold, which
Yes,
was
that was
extraordinary. So
that's right.
That is a problem. That problem is a 200-year-old problem, and they solved it in not that long a time. I mean, we don't know exactly how long they worked on it, but probably a couple of years. But that's changing everything in drug discovery. It's a whole new sort of way to discover drugs now. So you can test a lot of your molecules, figure out if they're going to be efficacious before you decide to go spend a bunch of money on a phase 3 trial. That's the beauty of them, and they're screening trials by and large. So it's a way to take a lot of it, because you start spending money when you get to phase 2, big money,
yes.
And then phase 3, huge money. So if you can take some of that out, and you can do that with these screening trials. So we could reduce the cost of drugs tomorrow if we chose to just adapt some of these new clinical trials approaches. But AI will be able to design trials better than we can. I can see this coming. So
you think that's where the future should converging?
If we learn how to ask the right questions, I mean,
Yeah.
I think the industry is going to be, smart enough to understand how to ask the right questions here, because they're
and that's the key message today from the discussion, right?
Yeah.
To make sure we have the right questions to
Yes.
explore.
Yeah, and oncology has a lot of very hard questions, and so people don't tackle the very hard questions. I mean, it's easier to answer the easy questions, and so AI will allow you to start to attack some of the hard problems that we just haven't known how to attack. And the other thing to think about this is, I come back to the fact that biology is Bayesian; it's all occurring. But we've been studying it not just even in systems, which I'm a complex adaptive systems scientist. That's what I want to think about. And that's all these systems coming together. How does it all work? But we can't figure that out with the current kind of training that we have and siloed science we have. So it will have to change. It will have to change.
I think AI learning has to be incorporated in all the curriculums.
Everywhere.
Yeah.
We have to train people, and they're not trained. And that, I think that is a huge barrier right now.
It should be a required course for all college degrees.
Yes, it should be. And it will be, I think, in the future. But, if you start thinking about it, the one barrier that is the biggest barrier we have in oncology in terms of AI is the biological world is not trained in mathematics. So I could not go out here today. Maybe here I know of at least 5 people in this room that could say yes to me, but I could come up with a problem, I could give you a data set and sit you in front of a computer, and you could build an algorithm to answer my question. And anybody in that room could do it for a very small question with a small data set. So the issue becomes, if the information's coming from everywhere, and in the case of humans, it's coming from everywhere. So I'm trying to answer, how do I predict who's going to respond to what drug? The algorithm has to know everything about that disease and the state of that disease. So you start, algorithms are built in tiers, and so tier 1's pretty simple. It always looks pretty good. The algorithm always looks pretty good. The second tier still pretty good. I mean, you know, because you remember it's learning from every iteration. When it gets to about tier 4, we have no idea what's going on. The algorithm is now teaching itself, and depending on
and that's the scary part.
it's gonna get really scary.
Yes,
It's scary now, but it's gonna be way
teaching
scary.
itself from all the data. Then we don't even know where they change the boundary.
Well, I mean, the whole AI space is going to move towards superintelligence. So I don't know if it'll be in my lifetime or even your lifetime that we see superintelligence actually far exceed ours. And people worry about things like that, you know, and well, maybe they'll do a better job, I'm not sure. But, you know, the other thing is we have to start thinking about the AIs as these are beings. I mean, you know, when you put them in robots, then people are going to start to realize, wait, this thing is functioning just like my brain. How, you know, and
I mean, if you use the ChatGPT and you start asking the questions, and after you ask enough questions about your interests, they started to generate integrated answers. It's just amazing. That's actually scary part.
It is a little bit.
Because they can hallucinate, they can mix up the information, and after a while you can't judge.
And we don't understand it. I mean, we really do not. No more than we understand how this works. See, so superintelligence, when you think of putting 8 billion brains together on a planet, you know, kind of thing, that's going to be pretty powerful. So there will be an era, I think, if this goes in the direction it could go, where by and large our problems will be solved by AI.
So are people getting government funding to explore AI based problems in oncology?
There's some, but I come back to my original sort of thesis, and that is the way we fund science has been discipline-oriented by and large, with the exception of some fairly big projects, as you point out, which were made so that we could enable more of that kind of discipline. And we haven't funded much in an integrative sense. And so I would say you're right. I don't think the government or academics either, with exceptions, have paid all that much attention to AI. And there is a reason for that. Because AI was very, very promising back in the 80s, early 80s. And there was a whole it was kind of like this, only much less, I guess. But people were really excited about neural networks and how, you know, we were going to harness all this back then. Well, back then, you know, certainly in biology, we didn't have the data, we didn't have the people, you know, we certainly didn't have any basis for understanding enough about these diseases to power an AI. So it kind of died off. And then, because
this is considered a second wave.
Yeah, this is it. It's a return of something that, you know, it came once, and the military used it pretty efficiently then, but it didn't have much of an impact at all on biology. But it was really based on trying to understand the neural networks in the brain, and we still don't. I mean, I'm not sure we ever will, not to the extent that we will need to understand them or should understand them, but it won't matter. It won't matter because I think our level of intelligence is going to be surpassed eventually by AI.
So what do you think we have take-home message from today's very focused activities of discussing AIs in oncology?
Well, I think the take-home message is AI runs on data. Okay, so everything that we do in science overall and in biology and cancer biology specifically going forward is going to depend on high quality data. So I think to really realize the advantages of AI in oncology, we're going to have to do a lot of prospective work in terms of creating new data sets, using artificial data. I mean, using approaches that will allow us to bring real context to our algorithms because, you know, I watch this with, you know, people in our own institute. We have a lot of young people who are extraordinarily good in building these algorithms, but they don't know much about disease. And so, I really think better data, prospective samples, longitudinal models, and bringing communities together that can start to set context for the math that has to be done here. The mathematics is not as daunting as it looks. It really isn't. It will become more daunting, but we've got the power to do this. And as you notice, it's very energy consuming. I mean, the big players are building these big energy centers now, and it'll drive the economy eventually.
So do you think this is considered one of the most exciting emerging areas in biomedical research?
If you put a knowledge network together, you will get something special out of it. And so that model is the way we did the Cancer Genome Atlas. It's the way we did GBM AGILE. It's the way that I did the Nanotechnology Alliance at NCI and the Proteomics Initiative and the Physical Sciences Oncology Centers. They're all knowledge networks. So today, you could not possibly singly understand the variety and the complexity of the data that you're looking at. You can't. So I think the future is going to belong to these knowledge networks. So I've shown they work, and they work time and time again. So I don't know why we aren't funding more of them. Scientists compete for funds primarily at the government and with the government. And so I heard from lots of people, you're not going to get people to work on this. They'll never publish together. They're going to put their careers at risk if they actually come into this project. None of that was true. None of it. When something really important that's going to change the world, it becomes obvious that it could and hopefully will change the world, people don't want to miss that boat. They want to be on that boat because people realize the power of working together. They just aren't encouraged and they aren't actually rewarded for working together. I mean, you hear in our field sometimes, well, that group doesn't get along with this group or this group doesn't get along with that group. Everybody gets along if the goal is really noble and you really are going to change the lives of people. No one wants to miss that.
I think it's the most exciting area, not just in biomedical research, but for the whole of humanity. So yes, I think it's the most exciting thing that's going to happen probably in our lifetime, and maybe in well beyond where we are now. So yes.
So this should be one of the focuses for many funding agencies.
It should be, yes, and funding agencies, especially the nonprofits, should start to put their power together, because you're going to need lots of data, and you're going to have to build these, as I say. If you really want to prevent disease, you are going to have to pursue these early detection approaches, and you're going to have to build the data sets to do that longitudinally. And there's no single organization that's going to be able to do that. So you're going to have to get some alliances and for the greater good. I mean, like what you did and what we did together and 140 of our closest friends, to build something that no one could have built on their own. And we're at that point now where that's probably where you would have to go. I mean, it's not going to come, I don't think it's going to come from the government for this. I just don't think we have, and academics are not going to drive this, Sujuan. It's going to be driven by the private sector.
I agree. The nonprofits are willing to take the risk and build an infrastructure, build a platform. There has no ROI per se, right?
Yeah.
The private companies, they spend money, they invest money in there. Their shareholders expect them to have ROIs. Building infrastructure, building platform, building collective communities don't generate the ROI in numbers, in dollar signs. So this is where the nonprofit can play an important role.
Yeah, and I hope that happens because a lot of very small nonprofits especially will have trouble surviving otherwise.
Yes.
But I think, I think the other changes are going to be the second thing that you focus on today, and that is entrepreneurship. And that's going to change a lot. I mean, and you heard.
I learned a lot.
Yeah,
in
you
the
heard a
last
lot
5,
of it
6
today.
years. Yes,
Yeah, you heard a
yes.
lot of it today.
Yeah.
But these are going to be people who use AI to design molecules completely, and those VCs will never be able to track those algorithms. I mean, they won't know. And,
They can't tell. It would be really like throwing darts on the wall, right?
I think by then they'll know at least where to throw the darts. But it's a whole different way that their AIs will become therapeutics. Now think about that for a second. So this will be virtual therapeutics, and no one can wrap their mind around that yet. But it's coming, and we're using them already. We're using them especially in digital pathology and some of the imaging we're doing. That's all AI driven now. But putting that together with with the therapeutic, for example. Well, getting back to my original reason for going into the government was to support the development of precision oncology and develop the platforms to do that. And we're pretty successful now with lots of targeted therapies, but when you talk about, less than, 30% of the people who actually qualify for these kinds of therapies are getting them. So, as I think Monica pointed out in her talk today, there's so much room here with the underserved areas to change this whole dynamic and the incidence of serious cancer especially, and people who are living out and they get diagnosed very late, or they don't have the advantage of an academic medical center. Those kinds of things can go away as you get into artificial intelligence and just putting things out in these communities in ways that we can't do now. So I think a lot of these big problems, and that's one of our biggest, if not our biggest problem, could be very much supported through AI. So I think there's some really good news here, I think.
This is exciting,
I have never been more excited.
Yeah, and we really have to pivot from traditional approach. Yeah,
there's a lot to do, but Richard Feynman, a famous Nobel physicist, he was talking about a particular kind of technology once, and he said there's plenty of room at the bottom. There's plenty of room at the bottom here to really get better and better at this, and everybody won't fit in that, but enough will, I think. As I say, science always finds a way.
It will take a very agile thinking, open mind, willing to tackle the big science.
It's another big science problem. It is. It's a big science problem, but it's one that we can enable but not control. I mean, I say that the only people who are going to have the kind of data is going to be in the private sector. And I don't know. That's the one thing we haven't discussed here is the ethics of all this, and you do have to put up some guardrails. You're going to have some issues related to bias in these things, and how ethical are they?
Yes.
I mean, especially if you can tell people how to make perfect children and all these kinds of things. I don't think anybody yet is wise enough, though, to know exactly what all those guardrails should be.
Yeah, right now it's almost like a wild AI.
It is.
A landscape now.
It is.
But
it's a little scary.
Challenges, scary, but promising.
Yeah.
Exciting.
No, it's the most exciting time I've ever seen, and I think, as I say, we have everything to gain here, and I commend you for really setting up this meeting. I thought that's absolutely the right idea, right focus, right time, and I think you brought out a lot of the issues today, both opportunities and problems. So I really commend you on that.
Thank you. That's great to hear. I'm so glad to get this feedback, and thank you for sharing your insights. And I think this is another time for us to work together.
Yeah,
like
big science.
GBM Agile,
big
another
science.
big science project.
Big science.
Yeah.
We have to get a lot of money for this one, though, so we'll have to figure that out.
I'm wondering it's going to be another project like the GBM. We have to use a little seed money from nonprofit like NFCR, and we set up infrastructure because at that time nobody truly believe in us,
Yeah,
right?
right.
They are excited, they watch, but they didn't want to put their money down for us until we showed it's viable, it's built, come and join us. That's how now they are.
That's a fair request. That's a fair request.
And so looks like this is going to be another project like that. So NFCR together with other nonprofits will need to take the lead.
Yes.
And put the seed funding and put the leadership at the forefront of it.
And pick the right questions.
Yes. Pick
the right questions. Yeah, that's going to be key. So no, I think it's very exciting, and I think there are a lot of things that are happening now already, just making doctors' lives easier. Sort of. I've never seen a time now when there's been as much just almost complete change of the way that people are being taken care of for this. I mean, everybody gets virtual care now. I mean, it's really very interesting. That's a change that's really going to make a big difference, I think.
I agree.
Having people not have to come to the doctor. So
that's fantastic. That's a good, healthy future to look forward to.
I'm excited. I am really excited.
Thank you for listening to this episode of All Things Cancer. Be sure to subscribe so you never miss future conversations. To learn more about how the National Foundation for Cancer Research is working with the global research community to make cures possible, visit nfcr.org. You can also reach us directly at 800-321-CURE.